Thank you again, that was fabulous. And on to the next one very quickly because we're very tight for time. We have someone I'm really excited to get on the stage for you today. I was probably a little bit more excited than I should have been when I found out that two 80-year-olds spent the night at his club. It's the CEO and founder of Fabric Nightclub, Cameron Leslie.
So, hello everyone. Thanks very much for inviting me down. Bit of a strange one because I didn't quite know what the mix of the crowd was going to be today and quite what anybody would get from me talking. So I put together something and I thought I'd try and share it with you today. Sort of a bit of my experience and hopefully whatever your background is, whether you're a business owner, somebody who's setting out in life, who has the intention of maybe going down that kind of entrepreneurial path, you might get something from some of the experiences we've had over our time. So I'm one of the co-founders of Fabric Nightclub and record label in Farringdon. My background was hospitality and leisure, primarily hotels before I got into this. I used to work for Deloitte Consulting. And so I'd gone down quite a sort of a corporate path for a period of time, which had taught me some of the more dry stuff, but the stuff you need to obviously balance the rest of the business out. And I was working on a big restaurant project, which is next to Fabric, which some of you might know, called Smith's. And we were raising the money on behalf of Smith's, and I met my partner, Keith, who had just lost two spaces in London in quick concession and was looking for a space to develop and build a big nightclub project. So he found this space underneath Smith's while I was developing this raising the money for the restaurant project, and he asked me if I could help him out raising the money for what became Fabric. And about 3/4 of the way through that project, he said to me, "Look, your background in hospitality and operations would sort of work well with my passion for music, and we could probably do this project together." But I was obviously raising the money at that point for the bank, and I took my employment contract to a lawyer, and he said that I've never told anybody on earth that they will never be able to get out of this contract quite in the way that you won't be able to get out of. So on the strongest possible terms, do not take this job, because if it goes wrong, you'll get slapped for being the one that misled the bank. So I thought, oh, that's it. And the next day I went into Deloitte's, very credible company, and my partner in charge of my team was sitting there with the head of Deloitte, who had never seen before, and he wandered past the office and pulled all of our team in and said, because of the kind of market conditions, we're going to dismantle the consulting team and we're going to offer you all jobs in corporate finance. But because this is a completely different world, your contracting terms of employment are now null and void. So if you want to, you can take voluntary redundancy, or you can go and work in corporate finance. So that was the first day of my new life working and starting Fabric. So we opened the club in October of 1999, an absolute lifetime ago now when you look at kind of music and media landscape. And much of its success on day one was that it was a very strong antidote to the clubbing climate at that particular time, which was very much led by the kind of super clubs, Cream, Gatecrasher, Ministry, and it was all around that super club mentality, the kind of DJs that were booked. And we started something that was very much non-conformist and was very much kind of an anti-brand, booking relatively unknown DJs as well as credible DJs, but very much from the kind of non-Radio 1 stable, which was quite unheard of, and certainly in a venue of sort of 2,500, 3,000 people a night, to be able to be pulling those in, week out, that was something that seemed to obviously hit the right note on day one and carried it forward. And as I say, we were a very strong anti-brand. Everything we were doing was kind of very much going against the normal way of running a venue in the late 90s. And perversely, I guess that's obviously turned it into a brand in itself now. So as I say, I was trying to sort of work out what I could really share with you today, given that I don't know too many people here, and kind of why you're here and why you want to listen to me. But I actually thought, rather than kind of sugarcoat it and talk about how great we are and how good things have been over the last 18 years, I actually thought I'd pick out 3 significant periods of difficulty that we had. And again, take from it what you wish, but the first was a significant kind of power struggle, for want of a better word, that we had between the founding partners, Keith and myself, and then our other partner, who was a majority shareholder at that point. And this was kind of 2 years into the project, and he wanted to take it in quite a commercial direction. No disrespect, but kind of down the roads of the ministry, festivals, tours, videos, credit cards, Ibiza, sponsorship, everything would be focused on the commercial aspects of it. And we found this really bizarre, because we were doing really well, and 2 years in, we kind of felt that was a very strange departure, given that we'd established something that was based on real things and was very true to what we wanted to set up. So, as I say, we kind of started going on this quite divergent path that probably lasted the best part of 16 months, and became very bitter, very nasty. Threats of violence were involved, and it became quite unsavoury. And so, at one point, I think we, both Keith and myself, got suspended for financial irregularities, which were completely trumped up. But that was our ex-partner's way of trying to stamp his authority within the business and separate us from the rest of it. And there's some kind of weird comical scene out, and I'd imagine it would be in a very sort of cheap budget British gangster film, where the 2 of us were sitting outside in an old Nissan Micra that Keith had up on St John Street, and I think we had kind of 9 or 10 mobiles on the dashboard, and we were just in communication with the club, because we were suspended from our own business and couldn't go within 200 metres of the club by law. And so the team were kind of running in and out to us while we were operating the club overnight from this Nissan Micra. But it became apparent to our sort of ex-partner at the time that even though he was in the club and running it, and we were outside and couldn't come anywhere near it, the spine of the business, the team, the artists, the crowd that were there, the business as such, was ours. And although he might have been the majority shareholder of that, he quickly realised that there was no way that he was going to be able to wrestle control of something that he ultimately had no direct ownership over. So that was really the beginning of the end for him, and we were lucky enough to emerge with the business in its entirety in mid-2003. And we were careful not to sort of air our dirty laundry around that kind of project. But you realise the business that you're in, creating and generating atmosphere and parties, and the teams that you have around you, the direct impact that negative times have on your customers, even though you actually feel you're probably the incident's quite a long way away from them. But there was a definite muted feeling around what we were doing, and the slingshot that we had as a consequence of coming out of that was really positive. The second sort of significant period was after when we opened a venue down in the O2, Matter, which we started looking at with AEG, who operate the former Millennium Dome, and had done so much good work in Los Angeles to regenerate and revitalise Los Angeles with the Staples Center. And they came with this big vision and dream of converting what, at the time was an absolute white elephant of a project. And so we got, I won't say suckered into it, but we got really pulled into this kind of idea of doing something quite special within London. And we didn't want to send our team out around the world. We wanted to concentrate on London and do something perhaps a little bit different outside of our core sort of underground ethnic nightclub. So we raised a considerable amount of money in about 2006 when banks were falling over themselves to lend money, and we decided to turn down a 7-year loan and take a 3-year loan, so we thought we'd be aggressive about paying that back and try and get ourselves into profit quickly. And the week we launched, which was September 2008, and considering this is probably a £10 million new build venue, which is quite sort of unheard of. So that week we actually launched was the week of the Lehman Brothers crash, and that sort of stock market graph was our fortunes at that particular point. And entering a new business with strict covenants in the bank, and trying to do that at a time when you're, let alone your core target market, but the residual sort of revenue streams that you want to try and get in have all contracted heavily, and even the core market, which I thought was quite resilient to that, young people who aren't affected by interest rates weren't going out, they were getting made redundant, there was, it's mass unemployment, and so that whole period, even for an established business like Fabric, was going to be an absolute nightmare for a new build venue. So we spent the next year and a half hemorrhaging cash. It was like the perfect storm of financial environment. We couldn't get ourselves out of it. High net worth individuals that we looked at in the past to be lending quick money with the new banks, and we just couldn't get ourselves out of that. So in the end, we decided we would close Matter. And although Fabric was a different business, it was cross-guaranteed against, and we had to put that into administration and then buy back our own business, even though it was actually put out on the market. So that was a really tough time, and that would have been around 2010. But we contracted back, we became very strong, we had a strong core business, and we rebuilt ourselves again. And so the third episode that I kind of wanted to share was a relatively well publicised court case that we had in the kind of last year. And the background to that was that in mid-2014 we were invited by our local borough council, Islington, to look at a modernisation of the licence. Licence is very outdated, they still are, they're still written back in the 80s, and so we completely agreed, and so we went and sat down and we were presented with 53 points that they wanted to see what our opinions were, and which we could adopt, which we could reword, and which we would actually have to reject because they wouldn't work for our kind of business. And then we had two very unfortunate fatalities in the space of probably 2.5 months. And just put it in perspective, we've had 6.5 million, nearly 7 million people through the doors over the 18 years, and we had 2 fatalities in 6 weeks, right at that time when we were talking about the licence. So the timing, let alone the impact that it obviously had on the team and the victims, the timing was absolutely horrible. And so instead of them looking at our track record, and I'd like to think sort of being pioneers and real pushers of best practice, they decided to say that all 53 points that we were talking about were now going to be conditions that we would have to take, or they would take our licence to review. And most of those points would range from kind of noise control to what T-shirts the staff would wear, so had absolutely nothing to do with security and safety. And so we just felt this was absolutely wrong, and started to put up a little bit of a fight. We took a lot of very, very good legal advice, which we ignored, and finally found a very, very good QC who's a real sort of non-licensing, cerebral thinker who was in his 70s, who'd probably never been to a club like ours before. And he really believed in us and the case that we were sort of fighting, and believed that a lot of these things that were being put on us were actually illegal as well. So the strategy was very much that we unfortunately had to let them take our licence to review. We had no way of getting over that, and so we had the kind of real public humiliation of having that dragged across the front page of the papers of how they were going to close us down, which they weren't. They were just using that to force these conditions upon us. But our strategy was, once we went into the licence review and lose, which we knew we would lose, we would then get that out and into a court of law and have that tested by a judge. So that was in the December of 14, the licence review, and then in the a full year later, in the December of 15, we went into court, had a full week in front of a judge there, and I'd like to say, against the kind of full might of Islington Council and the Met Police, we won on all counts, and so we had those conditions turned over. So, kind of in rounding up, I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of insight into the tougher times that you might have in your business and the entrepreneurial journey, which, again, it'd be very simple to stand up here and eulogise and tell you how great things are, but sometimes they're not. And it's the conviction and single-mindedness that you have to be able to kind of extricate yourselves from those situations and get yourselves out of it that is really something that you've got to try and draw upon to get you through those kind of dark patches. So thanks for listening, and enjoy the rest of the day.